Welcome to another episode of the Holistic Sister Circle. Today we have Rochelle here with us, and she is a rapid transformational therapist who primarily works with women who have experienced narcissistic abuse. She guides her clients to heal their relationships with themselves at the deepest subconscious level so they can leave their toxic relationships for good, create a life of freedom, peace, and purpose, and make sure they never end up in an unhealthy relationship again. Rochelle, I'm so glad to have you here. This is a topic that we absolutely need to break down. So thank you so much for being here.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's get into it, right?
Mhm.
The very first thing for me when I think of toxic relationships, and honestly, I want to take it back for a second in the midst of COVID. So in 2020,
Mm.
there was so much talk about now that parents and couples are in the house 24/7 with their children. Maybe they were working from home and things of that nature. They started to realize that their partners were in this particular environment, or maybe they were
Mm.
already in a toxic relationship. And now that they're home with this person, they're dealing with it a little bit more. What
Yeah.
has really been when you think about just toxic relationships overall, because I think we've all experienced them in some way, shape, or form, what do you feel like? Why do you feel like people are in this position and not really knowing if it's truly toxic or not?
Mm. Okay. Well, whenever I'm talking about narcissism, I like to give a little bit of a disclaimer because I know that this is a buzzword right now, right? There's so much talk in social media and in our society about narcissism and narcissists and toxic relationships. And I'm so glad that we're talking about it because I think that these conversations are helping a lot of people make sense of some of the abuse that they may have experienced in their relationship. So when I'm using the word, I'm not just referring to anyone who is selfish or self-centered. I'm specifically referring to individuals who would most likely fall on the spectrum of being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, or at the very least, be diagnosed with having narcissistic traits. So individuals who manipulate and abuse the important people in their life. And usually when it comes to narcissism, they're abusing the people they love. They're not abusing their boss at work. They're not abusing their friends. They're abusing their children and their partners at home. You know, we weren't having these conversations before. And it's really interesting because I have a long history of experiencing narcissistic abuse in past romantic relationships and also in my childhood home. And every time I share my story, it doesn't matter who it is, someone can, like, people relate to it. Right. Um, so I think it's one of those things where maybe similar to, um, other mental health issues, PMDD, being on, all the different neurodivergent spectrum, I think we're just having so much more awareness of what narcissism is and learning how to recognize that.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the difference? So obviously
Mhm.
there's so many people, maybe they haven't been diagnosed, but they may have the trait compared to people
Yeah.
who were actually diagnosed. And when are
Yeah.
these people really receiving help? Because I know, I know of people who they don't believe they have a problem. So
Right.
they don't do the necessary steps to actually get the help to get the diagnoses.
Yeah. And well, that's actually very, very common with narcissism because a narcissist will not go for help. And if they do go for help, they're very, very good at manipulating the therapist. Um, so it's very, very rare that someone is actually diagnosed with NPD. One of my previous partners was diagnosed with NPD, and that was just because he was seeing a psychiatrist on a regular basis for some other underlying mental health issues. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the most common symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder is that a narcissist doesn't have the awareness. right, like the insight and the self-awareness to be able to identify. Um, and so these are really, really good questions. I want to be very clear that I am not a psychiatrist, right? Like I don't have training. I'm not even a narcissistic trauma informed coach. What I do is a little bit different. I'm a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, as you mentioned. So, and I also have a lifetime of experience with narcissism in my personal life. So, what I do with rapid transformational therapy is that I guide my clients to rewire their subconscious mind so that they can create the life that they want for themselves, to reconnect with who they're truly meant to be. Um, and really heal their relationship with themselves at the deepest, most subconscious level, so that they can leave their, like you mentioned in my bio, that they can leave their narcissistic relationships for good, and they can do that inner healing work so that they can create a life of peace and freedom for themselves. And so I know that you have spoken to different rapid transformational therapists in the past, but for your listeners who aren't quite sure what RTT is all about, I'm just going to quickly mention how it works. So rapid transformational therapy is a very unique therapeutic approach that allows for deep healing by using different tools from psychotherapy, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So I guide my clients into a state of relaxation, which is also known as hypnosis, where we ask the subconscious mind for the root cause of whatever issue they're coming to me for. And once we know what their root cause is, we can transform these beliefs that are causing the pain and holding us back from creating the life that we want for ourselves, the magnificent life that we all deserve to have. And of course, that's going to look different for everybody. And so I work one-to-one with my clients to figure out what that is. And the thing about our subconscious mind is that most of our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us were formed before the age of 7 or 8, when we were helpless, dependent children and needed the love and acceptance of our parents and our society in order to survive. So in the past, being rejected from our tribe meant that we literally die. And this survival instinct is so deeply ingrained in our brain. And the problem is that as we grow into independent adults, we forget to update this old programming. We upgrade our computer software all the time, and our brain is the most valuable software that we have. So it's so vital that we update it at the subconscious level. So that's really the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, and I love that you're sharing this because it really gives
Mhm.
us a deeper perspective on where we can go.
Yeah.
Now, if there and you can let me know this more than anyone, but
Yeah.
if there's someone who says they've like, I've tried everything
Mhm.
and nothing has worked,
Yeah.
what needs to happen for someone to say, like, this is the type of therapy they actually are open to going into and to receiving?
Yeah. You know what? I'm actually going to share a little bit about my experience with RTT because I feel like that is going to answer that question beautifully. Um, if you asked me a little over a year ago what a narcissist was, I would have had no idea. And if you asked me if I had ever been in an abusive relationship before, I probably would have said, nah, not really. Um, and so I first learned about rapid transformational therapy when I was listening to a podcast about healing PMDD. And at that time in my life, I had been experiencing the debilitating symptoms of PMDD for decades. And I was hearing several women in the PMDD summit that I was attending talk about that they had healed their PMDD completely with rapid transformational therapy. And I didn't think that was possible. I thought that having PMDD was a life sentence, and I had tried everything. So that's just speaking to your question. I honestly had no idea what to do with it other than, get a hysterectomy. And so because I had tried everything else, I thought, why not? Why not invest in the RTT session? And the RTT session that I had was so powerful and so transformative in healing the PMDD that I used to have, that I knew almost immediately that I needed to learn how to give this gift to others. And it wasn't long after my first RTT session, maybe about 6 weeks, that I signed up with the Marissa Peer training program to become an RTT practitioner. And something very interesting happened after the PMDD that I was experiencing was healed. My nervous system started to regulate for the first time in my life. And through the process of learning for the first time in my mid 40s, what it felt like to be safe with a sprinkle of divine intervention on top, I started to have this inner knowing and this understanding that I was in a relationship with a covert narcissist at that time. And as I started to heal layer after layer of this old trauma, I started to understand that I had experienced several narcissistic relationships in my past and even in my childhood home. So I've actually found it really interesting doing this work that there is a massive correlation with PMDD and having had experienced narcissistic abuse. And this is because part of healing PMDD for myself and for those that I work with is that when you heal the underlying trauma, then there is nothing being triggered every month when we're in that vulnerable part of our cycle. So RTT has just made such a huge change in my life and the clients that I've worked with. And it really is a fabulous option when you've tried everything else. And that is because we're creating new neural pathways. And it has been shown that the most effective way to rewire neural pathways is with hypnosis. And this has been scientifically shown. Because our brain is just more receptive to suggestions when it's in a state of relaxation. And that's exactly all that hypnosis is a state of relaxation.
Mm. Now,
And
this
the
is
good thing is too, like when you heal at the subconscious level, you don't need to think about it anymore, right? The conscious mind gets out of the way. And so that's why RTT is so effective with phobias. You probably heard of hypnosis being used for addictions. And it's so effective because you don't actually even have to consciously think about the change that you're creating in your life because you've actually rewired your subconscious mind, which, the subconscious mind is responsible for 95% of our thoughts and our actions, up to 95%. It's suggested between, we've all seen like the iceberg, the conscious mind is 5%, 5 to 10%, and the subconscious mind is 90 to 95%. So we really, our subconscious mind really is in the front seat, right? Running the show behind the scenes all the time. So when we rewire that, we're really able to change our life for the better and create what we want for ourselves.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, for those, so say for example, you have, in your situation, I think this is your example was beautiful, but when you notice that those things were happening and you notice that, okay, this is actually affecting me,
Hmm.
could you share a little bit of maybe the traits that you had in yourself that were
Ah,
attracting you to these types of people in your life?
right.
I would love to learn, like, where were you mentally?
Ah, that's a good question. And so, as a rapid transformational therapist, one of the things that I have learned, one of the rules of the mind is that the mind will always choose the familiar on a subconscious level, right? So you've heard of the kids who will only eat chicken nuggets and fries with ketchup, or they only have, there's only 5 foods that they will eat over and over again as a child. And that is because our primitive brain is wired to choose the familiar because the familiar is safe. Um, right? Like that makes sense. Like if you're in the wilderness and you're picking the berries, you're going to eat the berries that you know are not going to kill you. So how that translates to narcissistic abuse, it's very, very common that when you experience abuse in your childhood home, that becomes normal, that becomes familiar. And I know it's so cliche and so textbook, but we do repeat these patterns because it feels familiar. And for myself, with my own personal story, I'm really astounded. I had such a high tolerance for feeling unsafe because feeling unsafe was normal for me. And also something that can happen is that when we experience abuse, especially in our childhood, we can get stuck in a survival instinct, right? Fight, flight, flop, freeze, and fawn. And especially with narcissistic abuse, fawn is very, very common where, we talk about people pleasing, we talk about, being quiet, repressing our voice and just, playing it small. That's a very common fawn response. So when we are put into a survival instinct in our childhood, it's very, very common to get stuck. So we're going through our whole entire adult lives, and I can relate to this, where you're stuck in a survival response without even realizing it. So it's really like as you start to heal those deep layers of trauma and your nervous system starts to regulate and you start to learn, you almost have to relearn, like, relearning how to walk after an accident or an injury. You almost have to relearn what safe feels like. And that can be really, really hard work. And that's one of the things that I do with my clients. When I started making these realizations, I had so much embarrassment and so much shame. Like, how the hell, like, how is it even possible that I repeated these patterns, right? Like I had a lot of self-loathing and a lot of different emotions about that when I started to make the connections and to make the realizations, because, people that I've talked to, they have a toxic relationship, they learn from that toxic relationship and they move on and have a healthy relationship. That wasn't my experience up to this point. Obviously, that will be my experience moving forward, but I kept repeating that pattern over and over again. And, if you read anything about narcissists are attracted to everything that they are not, right? They're attracted to the light. They're attracted to people who are successful and attractive and smart and loving and empathetic. One of the main symptoms of narcissism is the lack of empathy. So they are always going to be drawn to people who have those personality traits that they don't have.
That's so interesting. And
Right. And did you
I,
actually and I only know this based on studies that I've read. Again, this isn't something that I've been professionally trained in when it comes to narcissism, but narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder can actually show up on an MRI because there is damage to the frontal cortex, the frontal lobe, which is responsible for impulse control and empathy. So just not people who have NPD are not capable on a physical level. Their brain is not capable of empathy.
got it. No,
Yeah,
makes total sense.
it
Now,
does.
if someone wanted to just, of course, just like learn more from you about this
Yeah.
subject matter and say they're not even sure if they're even going through it, like they don't even know if this is it. They're not
Yeah.
sure, right? What are some practical
Mhm.
steps that you could give our listeners if they were in that situation?
The work that I do, typically clients will come to me when they already have the knowing. And here's what I'll say. It doesn't matter if you're in a relationship with someone who has NPD. If you are in a relationship that is not serving you, I promise you that you know it. I don't need to give a list. I don't need to do it, I don't need to do a checklist. When clients come to me, we all have that inner knowing, right? When it just doesn't feel right. So the work that I do with women can be to enhance that inner knowing, to build confidence, to help them find their voice, um, to help them find the strength to leave the relationship and just to heal that relationship with themselves. Because that's really what you need to do in order to leave a toxic relationship and make sure that it never happens again. You have to heal your relationship with yourself. Um, so I guess, yeah, I would say like the women that I work with, it doesn't even necessarily matter. Um, if their partner has NPD or they suspect narcissism and they're not sure, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they know that it's not working, that they're not creating the absolute best life for themselves and feeling connected, right? We always feel it in our gut.
And for though, what if there is someone who may be in that type of relationship, or maybe
Mhm.
their spouse or their partner have told them, "Hey, like, I'd suffered with this in previous relationships. I actually got the
Mm.
help." Is it
Oh, for narcissism
normal?
specifically?
Yes. Would it be normal for someone to fall back into those traits or to be
Mhm.
completely removed from them? What would that process look like? And it's okay if you don't know either.
Yeah, well, I can just answer based on my personal experience and all the research I've done and the reading and the conversations and the work that I have done. So everything that has been suggested. So professionals who work with NPD, there really isn't a clear understanding of what causes NPD. It's suggested that it's a combination of genetics and childhood trauma. Because when we experience childhood trauma, it can cause damage to our frontal cortex. So the actual cause of NPD isn't super clearly known yet. And it has been suggested that there really is NPD is a personality disorder. There really is no therapy or, approach for healing NPD. When someone is a narcissist and you leave the relationship, they absolutely will hoover you back in because they don't want to lose that supply that you're giving them. They will absolutely go to therapy. They'll go to therapy with you. They will promise you that they've changed and all of the things. But from what I know about narcissism, actual change and healing for a narcissist isn't possible. So if you are in a relationship with a narcissist, the best thing that you can do is to go no contact, to leave the relationship and work on healing the relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
And I hate sounding so like there's no hope. And believe me, like I've gone through so much grieving when I, learned this and realized this because narcissists are attracted to empaths and people with such deep emotional parts of themselves. And we always want or we believe in the best, or we believe we want the best for people. We want them. Um, yeah, I feel pessimistic saying that change is impossible, but that's what the research shows, that there is no way to heal narcissistic abuse and the patterns
Understood.
will continue. Yeah, right. And that's a hard pill to swallow, especially if you're in love with someone or rather in love with who they're pretending to be. And that's interesting too. I work a lot with grief, and something that's very um, unique with healing from narcissistic abuse. You're not grieving the loss of that person. You're grieving the loss of who they were pretending to be. You're grieving the loss of someone who actually never even existed because the personality that they created was specifically for you. And that's part of the personality disorder. That's why it is a personality disorder.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rochelle, and just sharing this with us. Now, if anyone
Mhm.
wanted to connect with you further and just learn more about RTT and how it works, what do they need to do? What are the steps?
Yeah. So my website is the best one stop place for all of that, RochelleUveges.com. And so the way that I work with clients most effectively is with my one-to-one 30-day transformation packages. And all of that is on my website. You can also follow me on Instagram. And I also have some beautiful pre-recorded hypnosis audios for sale on my website. I'm really excited. Actually, I'm just about to launch a free mini course called Getting Back on the Dating Saddle After Narcissistic Abuse. Dating again after narcissistic abuse can be very triggering and terrifying. And in this free mini course, I talk about why it doesn't actually matter if you end up dating another narcissist. And I also talk about the one thing that you need to do and the one thing to avoid when getting back into the dating saddle. And I'm also going to be launching an 8-week course program called Let Your Light Shine, which is all about, again, healing narcissistic abuse and having a rapid transformational therapy session to heal at the deepest subconscious level with me.
I love it. Well, Rochelle, thank you so much for just blessing us with your presence today
Oh,
and
thank
sharing
you.
more about
Yeah.
this. I
Thanks.
appreciate you. Queen, thank you so much for tuning in. It truly warms our heart that you're taking the time out of your day to connect with us. If you'd like to connect with our guests further, you can find their information located in the description section of this episode. And if you found this episode helpful, share with another queen. And don't forget to connect with the Holistic Sister Circle on Instagram and Facebook. And until next week, stay blessed. Mwah.